the particular in real world mechanism used to steal votes or manufacture votes does not matter. So if the VBM is manipulated, or people are paid off, or they're threatened, or they have misinformation, all of these different varieties have different effects in distorting intentions. And the idea that I'm pursuing in my research is the extent to which eForensics can capture all of those. Right now, I'm doing it in an inductive way, which means looking at hundreds of elections and seeing what happens. 5 years from now, I hope to have done some modeling to be able to do in a more slightly more deductive way, where you generate synthetic elections and see how it turns into eForensics estimates. And that's not here yet. So that won't be in the book I'm writing, but hopefully 4 years after that, I'll have done some of that. I've done some preliminary work on that, but that will presumably either show that it actually does what I say, hope it does. I should say hope, because I don't know whether it does it, or it fails, or hopefully gives more refined interpretations. So this is the direction of the research program. But this particular mechanism, if you find fraudulent votes, it could be all kinds of ways it happen, which is why you need supplemental information from witness testimony and other kinds of credible things about what actually happened to flesh out the story.
Hey, Walter, so our election's in 6 years. So if you get your paper done,
I'll try to hurry. I'll try to hurry.
All right.
And we'll look out for your book. Again, we've been getting a lot of these questions. The purpose of this press con is to, the reason for this presentation is to have, to talk about election integrity and our democracy. This is not necessarily at this point to overturn the election. So, we have to point out if we have three experts in our panel who are, pointing out where there are, parts of the election that could have been fraudulent. So, yes, so I'm just to address a lot of the questions of what are we going to do. The point of the press con is that we are showing you the findings of our analysts. So there we go. This is from Miss Bienvenida Vio Vicente. Many of us have that kind of suspicion, but they have proclaimed already. Okay, sorry, never mind. We already answered that. Okay, this is from Dr. Walter Mebane.
Nope, I didn't send it. Must be for me, maybe.
It's for you, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. In the context of presentation. Okay, that's already answered as well. Sorry, guys. This is like a 500-person chat. So it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Give me a second. All right. What about the random manual audit as prescribed by law that happened at the Diamond Hotel? Any updates from NAMFREL? Not for us as well. I don't think anyone
Gus
knows.
was supposed to be here today, but he's in another conference.
Yeah, sorry, he's in another conference. He would have been able to answer that. Can we not still do anything to establish the truth in this recent election?
Trust me, we all want. That's what we all want, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's possible at this point. But again, it's up to Lenny, and if Lenny decides that she wants to, for some reason, decides she wants to put up a protest, and definitely, we have some things to back her up with some numbers, and we'll do our best. But unless that happens, it doesn't look like it's going to be a way forward, except for just to make sure our next election is better.
Yeah. This is another question for you, Engineer Daly. What about the issue of fixed ratio between Marcos and Lenny?
The 47% that was showing up on day one of the elections. So that number, I also noticed that number as well initially, and I think they were able to sufficiently prove that was not an issue. I mean, they're stating the law of big numbers is the reason for that percentage showing up, and if they show the incremental changes, yes, you're going to see some variation, which makes some sense. And PPCRV allowed academics to look at the numbers and dissect the numbers. I mean, the worst thing that could have that would have done is to just show an early trend and project that trend. And now that we have all the numbers in, supposedly anyway, so those percentages won't hold water in terms of the protest. That I don't think it's really easy to prove that was not an intentional anomaly, or so. Although it looked like anomaly at the start, it's easily to be proven wrong when looked at. And I think the ones who looked at the numbers, I didn't look at it myself, but the people who did look at it are pretty credible, and they were able to see that there was no issues with those numbers. Again, they were looking at numbers from the ER, which our question is, we're questioning the numbers before the ER, right? So any numbers after the ER are going to be. My analogy is I compare it to someone taking an exam and cheating off his seatmate. Okay, so he copies all the answers from his seatmate, submits it to the teacher. The teacher is going to grade the exam. He's going to get 100, right? Because he copied off the smartest kid in the class. Unless he saw that he was cheating, it's not going to be. I mean, the ERs are just checking those numbers, where the cheating might have already been done. Okay, so it's not really. So to answer your question, the constant ratio issue, it's not an issue anymore.
Sadly.
Yeah. All right.
I want to read out a comment from Ms. Catherine Milagrosa. I wouldn't mind the election of BBM and Duterte if it was shown as a strategic shift of voters. What I mind is that they had to distort the numbers so that they won by a wide margin. That is just ego massage. Yeah, they've been flaunting that 31 million all over.
Let me just comment on that. I mean, the question is, if they were going to win anyway, why would they cheat? And the answer is, a lot of people do that. That's a very frequent behavior, because people want to have even bigger margins, look more invincible, or their ego gets in the way. So, and they also need to maintain their apparatus. If they have people they pay, for example, to do various things to corrupt the vote, if they didn't need them in this election, they will need them in the next election. They need them last time. So they want to keep the machine well oiled. So it's not surprising to me. So you can have an extra padding on top of what could have been a pretty hefty victory anyway.
Which will help their long game for the next election, correct? Mm-hmm. Obviously.
Well, probably. Who knows what the reaction is? People start to believe they committed all this fraud, but you look around the world, this very often happens.
Right. For Dr. Mebane, has your e-forensics model ever been presented in court? And how did it withstand a court challenge? That's from Ms. Nana Luz.
No, it has not been presented in court.
Okay. All right. This is Dwight De Leon from Rappler. Just to play a bit of a devil's advocate, because your PR said massive election fraud was uncovered, which might be a dangerous claim unless there is hard, solid evidence. Number one, can the premise of irregular senator to president vote ratio not be explained by just perhaps the massive, unprecedented popularity of Marcos Jr.? He has two other questions, so can anyone answer that first? So we could.
Well, I said something bad about the press release before I started, but it was just in comparison to 11 million. The 2.7 million didn't look all that massive, but 2.7 million strikes me as a pretty massive number. So, and various estimates I had before were larger or smaller, but I've never seen a number that was big enough to change the election outcome. But whether 2.7 million is massive or not, I think that's not really a thing that matters.
Okay. Anyone else want to add something to that?
Can you repeat the question again?
And the premise of irregular senator to president vote ratio not be explained by just perhaps the massive, unprecedented popularity of Marcos Jr.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say that you can definitely use that as an explanation. and whether you believe it or not is up to you, and it'll depend on which side you're on. The numbers are the numbers, and right now, based on those numbers, the answer would be yes. He's so popular; he got the highest votes ever in our election, and you know, it just doesn't seem unlikely, but it's not impossible. So the answer to that question is yes. It can be explained with that premise, but it can be explained by a lot of other stuff as well.
Okay. Number two, on the research of Mr. Walter, did I get it right that the research/formula is not exclusive to automated election rigging, but covers on-the-ground irregularities, in parentheses, vote buying, violence, intimidation? If that's right, there really is no contention that these kinds of fraud is prevalent offline, but people might leave this webinar getting the impression that there is AES rigging.
Yeah, as I said before, the e-forensics method, as far as I understand it, is not specific to a particular type of bad behavior. It may be that the different manners and mechanisms for committing fraud do leave different traces in the counts, but I don't know that yet.
Okay. And lastly, how can these reports of supposed irregularities possibly bypass the layers of checking in the AES, such as the random manual audit and the cross-checking conducted by PPCRV, both of which yielded an accuracy rate of 99% so far?
Okay, let me address the PPCRV first. So, as I mentioned earlier, the PPCRV are auditing the election returns, which are the numbers that were tabulated by the VCMs. So again, to my analogy of the person cheating on the exam was cheated on, and then we're going to check the exam, right? So I wish Gus Lagman was here because he knows more about the other part, the random the random check that they're doing with NAMFREL. So I'm not too familiar with that part. But remember on Gus's presentation, he did mention that for this election to be successful, we'd have to trust the COMELEC and the Smartmatic, and whether we trust them or not is the question at this point. They hold all the cards, so they would have to be the ones who would have to have the integrity and the honesty to do an election properly, right? So we're at their hands at this point, and there's nothing we can do. That's why I think the transparency suggestions by Gus Lagman is on point, and it'll add a few hours to the process, but what's a few hours for a week-long process, right? So
yes. From Ms. Jen Olaya. It says for Tita Bambi, have you coordinated with the she is the organizer of this press conference. Have you coordinated with the Office of the Vice President and the Office of Senator Kiko Pangilinan to look at these findings and do the proper course of action? Tita Bambi, can we put you on spotlight?
Oh, Bambi is hiding.
Oh, it's okay. We could go back to you if you have an answer for that. But all right. From Ambassador Jose Cuisia Jr., someone said that even if we accept that there was fraud and cheating, the number of fraudulent votes would not be enough to overturn the results of the election. So, okay. Well, we already said that this is really more of an...
It's a yes and a no. You don't know. Depending on how much fraud there was. I showed that there's a possibility that it could have been enough, right? So again, that's something we'll never know unless we see the actual count.
Here, this is from Leo Angelito Fetiza. Why not start doing the electronic forensic investigations on precincts where Lenny got 0? I'm not sure if everyone is familiar about this, but there have been 595 precincts where Lenny got absolutely no votes. Like, what would you say about that? And any of the panelists can answer.
I had to look at the numbers where Lenny got 0 votes. So if you got all the precincts where she had 0 votes, it was just around the 200,000 vote margin. But if you go a little further and look at precincts where she got 10 or less, it came out to around 5 million votes. So there might have been some. Let's not focus on the 0 votes. Let's focus on the low vote precincts. I think the best way to do is to check those precincts and compare them to how much did Lenny get in 2016 for those same precincts. Unfortunately, I don't have the data by precinct in 2016, so I can't do that comparison.
Oh, I see.
If someone has it, please.
The 2022, I'm pretty sure Rappler published those precincts in a recent article. All right. I think we are already at 11:30. I want to let our panelists go if they need to go. I know this is very late for Professor Mebane. We do have a lot more questions and a lot more comments, but unfortunately, there's too many to be able to go over. Can our chat moderator, like maybe one last question, tell us one last question to give our panelists before we let them go? Miss Anya, do you have
So from Marmy Maglaya, is there a possibility that they already encoded padded data in the SD cards of the VCMs? A lot of machines conked out during election day, and election officials kept blaming the SD cards, and they had to change them first before voting could resume.
That's a theory, obviously, and one I want to find out as well. I'm not familiar with what actually the SD cards do. They say it's just there to identify the machines, right? So, but being a data person myself, and I'd question. I mean, I think that's a valid question. Could the SD cards have somehow been padding numbers or manipulating the numbers? And again, that goes to the question again earlier on Gus Lagman's presentation. Do we trust Smartmatic and do we trust the COMELEC? And they're the ones who hold all the cards at this point. Definitely a valid question from Ms. Maglaya.
I'll just say one thing about this. It's kind of a joke, but it kind of reflects the idea that I have extreme skepticism about electronic records where you have no way to validate the electronics. From Russia, it used to be at least pretty easy to get their precinct level data or polling station level data because they had all these electronic databases and everything. So students and I went in, and 2 days after election, we could get all the data from Russia. So if you go to Armenia, in fact, they were really good at it because you could get the data from their database servers 2 days before the election.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
All right.
All right. I think that concludes our panel. If you still have a lot to say, maybe a lot of us could stay on board, but unfortunately, I think it's time to. We actually went more than 10 minutes that I've said. We went 30 minutes over. I'm so sorry about that to our panelists, but thank you for your patience. Well, this webinar, as I've said, it shows that there is not evidence, but it shows that it questions the legitimacy of the elections. When the legitimacy of elections is called into question, democracy is threatened. And that is why we're all here today. The Coalition of Global Philippines for Good Governance is hoping that, perhaps these findings will lead to an independent investigation to the allegations of massive fraud and highlight transparency and to highlight transparency issues to protect electoral integrity and democracy, if not for now, but for future elections. We hold dear to our hearts the values of transparency, honesty, freedom, and democracy, and we should not back down, for this fight for truth and justice for our beloved Philippines. Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure serving as your moderator. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Hey.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.